very significant problem with military medicine.
An investigation years in the making.
And the DoD's fighting you from letting you know the truth. Why are they hiding it?
Into a system leaving men and women in uniform with virtually no path to justice.
Did you have any idea at all that you could not sue the government?
No, I had no idea.
For more than 2 years.
See that date, May 3rd, 2022, and that's where it all began.
We fought to get records that shed light on malpractice in the military healthcare system that treats hundreds of thousands of service members.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They killed her.
4 years.
And no answers.
We uncovered mistakes and misconduct impacting families across the country.
It's a chasm of untruths, zero transparency.
Tonight, we walk through the series of stories that has lifted the veil of secrecy the military used to protect problem providers. For the first time, we uncover just how many military doctors and nurses have been disciplined behind closed doors.
Service members have never seen this.
Reporting that caught the attention of Congress.
Nobody would know about it if it wasn't for whistleblowers within the Defense Department or investigative journalists.
It's an investigation that pushed for answers for the military families whose lives have been shattered.
She would have done this for life.
We've got to make sure that they're held accountable.
Here is Josie Sturman with Doctors of Defense.
Doctors who missed obvious signs of cancer, surgeons who botched routine procedures, providers who kept upping the dose of opioids, prompting an overdose. In the civilian world, these mistakes would likely end up in disciplinary records anyone can see. But in the military, critical information about medical mishaps and malpractice is shielded from public view. For more than 2 years, we've been pulling back the curtain of secrecy that surrounds one of the most powerful agencies in the federal government, the Department of Defense. More specifically, its healthcare arm, the Defense Health Agency. Our work exposes how the military is often able to avoid liability for deaths and injuries, while also keeping details about the people involved under wraps, putting up barriers to protect problem providers, leaving service members and their families at risk when they seek medical care here at home.
She was prideful, like she was proud. She loved it when people, thank you for your service.
When Master Sergeant Crystal Stuckey enlisted in the Air Force, she knew there was a chance she'd lay down her life for her country.
My wife was a victim. She really was.
But her husband, Feres, an Air Force veteran himself, never imagined the battle that would kill her would be against doctors also serving in uniform.
Do you feel like the military healthcare system failed your wife?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They killed her. They had plenty of opportunities to fix her or to try to fix her. And they didn't. They just kept pushing her down the road.
And missing the correct diagnosis. Crystal's family says for months, doctors on base dismissed the excruciating headaches and pain that brought her to the ER as often as 2 times a week. All the while, fluid was building around her brain. It took Crystal down for good while riding in the car with her mother and children.
That's when she woke up and said, hey, Mom, I feel like I'm dying. As a matter of fact, I know I'm dying. She took off her jewelry and everything, gave it to her mom and said, can you please get this to my husband and tell him I'm sorry. I fought as long as I could, but I can't take it anymore.
Crystal's family picked up the fight for their fallen hero, but their attempts to seek justice were blocked. The military and its medical provider shielded from public responsibility in a system that we've discovered leaves service members and their families in the dark, without answers and often without a path to seek compensation.
These are simple issues.
For more than 2 years, our national investigative team has been putting names and faces to a fraction of the hundreds of people fighting potential medical malpractice in the military.
Headaches and death, ear tubes and brain damage,
Shoulder surgery and death.
The families and victims who went through it all met by a wall of resistance in their battle for accountability.
So we've got Florida, Maryland, California, Maryland, Texas. So across the country.
They're forced to fight something called the Feres doctrine, a decades-old court decision that effectively bans service members from suing the government for malpractice. Years ago, Congress tried a workaround, passing legislation that allows active duty military to file malpractice claims. But that process, we've found, is secretive, handled behind closed doors by the military itself, and without the usual legal tools like witness testimony and discovery. The system has been plagued by denials and lengthy delays, with some claims sitting in limbo for years.
And his claim has been denied.
And others turned down with little explanation from the military for families who lost the ones they loved.
At what point did you know something is really wrong with Jordan here?
From day one. And I live with that guilt. I live with that guilt. That why didn't I get on a plane and do something about this? But he kept saying to me, Mom, I'm gonna be okay. I trust them.
Jordan Way's mother, Susie, says her son had no reason not to trust the medical staff at Bush Naval Hospital at 29 Palms in California. He was one of them. The 23-year-old Navy corpsman filled prescriptions as a pharmacy tech, but it was the one written for him after routine shoulder surgery that would turn out to be a poison pill. Records show doctors kept upping the dose on his pain meds, despite repeated claims it wasn't working. Jordan died just 3 days later from opioid intoxication. Records showing he took more than 80 oxycodone as directed.
Your mind just starts writing a story that you don't have any content, true content to fill in the gap, so to speak. And then to try to get that information and to be told continually, we don't have to tell you anything.
Our series of investigations has repeatedly attempted to dig up the truth, shedding light on how malpractice is covered up in the military, not only when it involves service members, but also their families.
He was getting a common procedure that children get every day. Ear tubes.
Dependents of active duty personnel can and do file malpractice lawsuits. They're not fettered by the Feres doctrine. An annual report to Congress shows almost $1 billion in taxpayer money has been spent since 2009 to resolve just their cases.
That tells me there's a very significant problem with military medicine that needs to be looked at and addressed. And it would start, in my mind, with holding these doctors and the other folks involved individually accountable for what's happened here.
But accountability can be avoided to some extent because the government pays the cost of military malpractice and the providers involved aren't made public. That congressional report doesn't name names, which may only come to light when egregious cases make headlines or filings end up on the internet. Even when they do, military malpractice victims still have no idea whether the providers involved have been punished. That's kept completely confidential.
You see that date, May 3rd, 2022, and that's where it all began.
For more than 2 years, our team has been battling the Department of Defense and the Defense Health Agency, which oversees military health care, trying to get information about malpractice cases involving military doctors and other healthcare providers in uniform. Since May 2022, we filed at least a dozen Freedom of Information Act requests with both departments as well as the individual branches of service.
What do you think the obligation is on the military to be more transparent about this?
Right now, the secrecy isn't really helping anyone except for people who are bad actors.
Bad actors protected from public view. In the civilian world, disciplinary action against doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals is routinely posted on state board websites for anyone to see. But the military shares nothing like that with service members or their families, even in malpractice cases where people are hurt or killed.
You can still get some level of data that isn't going to hurt anybody's privacy, but is going to shed some more light on the problem and the issue. And the government should be putting this information out already. It's embarrassing.
You're doing these stories to let everyone know the truth, and the DoD is fighting you from letting you know the truth. Why are they hiding it? Why are they hiding it? Because it's bad.
After the threat of potential action from our legal team, we were finally given limited data never before seen by the public. It pulls back the curtain on a secretive system that shields those health providers from accountability. The military wouldn't name providers, but did tell us basic statistics about reporting to the National Practitioner Data Bank. That's a confidential government repository that houses disciplinary records and malpractice judgments against healthcare professionals across the country. It includes cases involving misconduct and mistakes, even injuries and deaths. But service members and members of the public can't see who's in there. The Defense Health Agency data showed that between 2018 and 2022, there were at least 160 suspensions of 30 days or more reported to the databank. Nearly 200 cases where military providers had action taken against their privileges to practice, and more than 250 cases where peer review panels found providers failed to meet the basic standard of care. But those numbers didn't tell us just how many providers were actually involved in those cases or what roles they played.
How can you have that many incidences and that many problems and that much cost? The scary part is, who are they?
We continue fighting to find out. With the defense agencies repeatedly stonewalling our efforts, our team tried a new approach, requesting specific information about which kinds of providers are in that confidential databank from the confidential databank itself. What we obtained shows more than 200 military doctors, nearly 170 nurses, and almost 400 other medical professionals, like physician's assistants and dentists, have been reported for disciplinary action since 2018.
Yeah, finally, we've got Blondie.
But their punishment remains a mystery, even to the people they may have harmed.
Do you know if any of the nurses or doctors involved in your care in any of these mistakes, were they disciplined in any way?
Not that I know of.
A scheduled C-section with her fourth child changed Army Captain Blondie Victor's life forever. In 2019, instead of taking her baby home, she spent nearly a month in a military hospital after hemorrhaging blood hours after delivery. An emergency hysterectomy turned into a cycle of surgeries and infections after Blondie discovered doctors sewed her stomach to her intestines.
If I was not my own advocate and if I was not medical or healthy at that point, I would have died.
She's still living with the pain and complications 5 years later. Despite her goal of making major, Blondie retired from the Army, filed a malpractice claim against the military that's still in limbo, and moved her nursing career into the civilian world, where secrets like the ones surrounding her case are a little harder to keep.
These doctors, if they were sued in court, we would see their names, we would see the outcome, we would see the allegations, but because this is within the military, it's all kept secret. What do you think about that?
I think that's a disgrace.
Our investigative team was able to share the stories of people like Blondie Victor with help from a network of established, deeply entrenched sources from the military community, but also thanks to some outside-the-box thinking that brought sources pouring in from across the country. Early on in our reporting, we created a survey that was attached to each story we filed and shared repeatedly on social media. That survey, which asked people to share their experiences with military medical malpractice, led us to dozens of sources we talked to both on and off the record to bolster our reporting, including malpractice victims, experts on discipline for medical providers, hospital credentialing, the military justice system, and insiders within the Defense Department. The survey was instrumental in connecting us with a military whistleblower who was willing to put his career on the line to share confidential documents. Using those records, our team showed for the first time how military officials evaluate severe injuries and deaths following a mishap, acknowledging mistakes and missteps in black and white, but keeping the discipline and consequences from ever seeing the light of day.
It was a package that arrived in the mail that is helping to crack a curtain of darkness around negligent care at the hands of military doctors. A whistleblower sending our national investigative team documents typically kept confidential by federal law. We're seeing something families don't when their loved ones are killed or severely injured by military providers.
It's a chasm of untruths, zero transparency.
Most unaware of this paperwork that details the play-by-play that happens after a mishap in a military medical facility as doctors lay bare problematic and tragic cases. After a death or serious injury, this is the first step the military uses internally to evaluate the potential for discipline or liability. It details whether doctors made errors in technique or judgment, delayed diagnosis, communicated ineffectively, even whether equipment was missing or failed to work. It asks two critical questions. Was the incident preventable? Did military providers meet the standard of care? But even when mistakes are made and acknowledged in black and white, what's said in this paperwork is withheld from military families, even if they sue or file a claim. It's yet another part of a secretive process that shields military families from finding out what really happened to the service members they love.
If they can keep everything a secret, is there any incentive to do things better?
No. What? They hold all the cards. They hold all the cards. And they're not being, and the DoD is not being held responsible.
We've been trying to hold the military accountable for years, relentlessly asking for both records and interviews to question leaders about the lack of transparency we've uncovered. The Defense Health Agency has repeatedly dodged our requests and our questions. But after pushing to talk on the record for more than a year and going through numerous background calls and negotiations, we finally got a chance to sit down with a top official at the DHA.
I commit to them, and our system commits to them, that we're doing everything we can to make the care safer and safer.
Dr. Paul Kortz is the Chief Medical Officer of the Defense Health Agency, the organization that oversees medical care for service members and their families. He's sitting down with our national investigative team for the first time following our years-long investigation, digging into medical malpractice in the military system.
My heart breaks for patients who have had complications and unintended outcomes as the result of our care.
Those unexpected and tragic outcomes have impacted the lives of thousands of service members and their families across the country.
This was him the morning of his surgery, and this is how they returned him to me.
They failed him.
I know she didn't want to die. She had a family, she had kids, she had a husband.
But the DHA has been reluctant to answer wide-ranging questions about how mistakes, mishaps, and malpractice are handled, until now.
I think we've been very aggressive about being transparent.
Our investigations have found transparency is hard to come by, with people forced to fight to get information about how their loved ones were seriously hurt or killed in military facilities, and the identity of the providers involved withheld.
Our reporting has uncovered hundreds of reports about military physicians and medical providers made to a confidential databank that tracks discipline, lawsuit settlements, and malpractice payments. Hundreds of suspensions and other disciplinary action taken against providers following mistakes or misconduct, and nearly $1 billion spent on malpractice claims filed against military doctors in the last 15 years.
Despite serious discipline and big dollars spent, the names of all those problematic providers are kept confidential by law. In the civilian world, that's not the case, with state medical board websites often listing discipline and malpractice payments. But in the military secretive system, patients are left in the dark.
If the goal is transparency, why not disclose doctors who have been disciplined?
Well, as I said, we follow federal regulations.
See, if they're outside the military system, they can look up whatever they want. If they're inside your circle, they can't do that. Does that feel right?
As a surgeon, what feels right to me is having a conversation with my patient. This piece about transparency is near and dear to my heart. Being transparent with the patients, we can certainly think through, not that more can't be done necessarily, but I think we've been very forthcoming with respect to the information that we have made available to the patients.
Courts pointed to agency and third-party websites that detail ratings, patient survey results, and statistics related to harm and deaths at specific military facilities and clinics. But we found the agency's Transparency Hub is hardly transparent, with no data found about adverse events at some locations and outdated news releases, reports, and policies on their homepage. The most recent post highlights high safety grades given to just 9 military hospitals, something courts cited during our interview, along with consistent recognition for a handful of facilities by the American College of Surgeons. But when pressed about the basic data we obtained about providers on the other end of the spectrum, those involved in discipline, he was far more elusive.
Is it satisfactory to you to have 500 doctors or providers reported in that small window of time?
Josie, we have multiple sources of information about the safety and quality of our care.
To you, does that seem like a low number? Is that a high number? What does that amount of reporting say about the quality of the military healthcare system?
We deliver excellent, safe, high-quality care.
Court says the goal is zero harm, something he says the DHA tries to achieve through root cause analysis, looking at what went wrong in serious injuries and deaths, using data to look for trends system-wide, and then creating policies designed to improve healthcare quality overall.
They deserve the highest quality, safest care that can be delivered anywhere in the world, and that's my commitment and our commitment to make that happen.
We continue pressing for the information the Defense Health Agency has repeatedly told us it discloses as part of its transparency effort. Our team recently filed 3 new additional FOIA requests seeking information the agency said it would hand over months ago. We still haven't gotten that or records we've asked for related to specific providers involved in the cases we've covered. As our fight continues, members of Congress are responding to our investigations. What we reported, did it surprise you, shock you?
Of course it shocked me. I need to thank the journalists that are involved in investigating these things, because there's so many things that are wrong with the Defense Department. Nobody would know about it if it wasn't for whistleblowers within the Defense Department or investigative journalists that are looking into it.
What does that say about the quality of military health care for spending that much money and reporting that many people?
This is obviously a big problem. It's a bigger problem than the attention that it's gotten in the news. These are people who are serving the country, but they've been wronged, and they deserve better than they're getting now.
Congress isn't just reacting to our stories, they're using it to fuel their own efforts on Capitol Hill, saying they're grateful for our reporting. And right now, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are pushing legislation that would let active duty service members actually sue the government, as an injured Air National Guardsman takes that same fight to the Supreme Court.
It means a lot. It means that I worked hard for this.
When Ryan Carter was given this gold challenge coin after surviving basic training, he had no idea what serving his country would cost him and his family.
Very few get this coin, and you earn this coin.
Since graduation, he's earned way more than a token of respect. Carter gave more than a decade of service to the Air National Guard, including working on giant cargo planes big enough to carry tanks and troops into the air. But what happened in a Maryland military hospital in 2018 grounded him for life.
And the surgeon comes in, pulls me into a private room, and doesn't explain what happened, but just said something went wrong, and he's paralyzed.
A lot of therapy goes into that maneuver.
Ryan, a former staff sergeant, now relies on a wheelchair, unable to use his legs after elective spine surgery to deal with chronic pain in his neck. He was paralyzed at Walter Reed, the military's premier hospital, when the procedure went tragically wrong.
It's like someone just, went in and cut my nerves and just said, good luck.
Attorney filings claim military doctors were negligent during Ryan's surgery, listing 22 specific failures from anesthesia to aftercare, breaching the standard of care, leaving him with a spinal cord injury that had him hospitalized for weeks, in rehabilitation away from home for years, and in need of 24-hour care for life, with his wife Casey acting as his caretaker and steadfast cheerleader, even when the weight of it all feels like too much to carry.
That's probably the toughest for me, is
seeing me going through a lot of pain.
when he's in that much pain, there's nothing I can do but him crying, because he's in so much pain. And the moments, and I'm sorry, but the moments when he says, I don't think I can live like this much longer, it's too painful.
It's pain amplified by injustice that only applies to those in uniform. If Ryan was a civilian, he could fight in court for damages, alleging medical mistakes and taking his case to a judge and jury. But as we've reported, active duty service members can't sue the government for malpractice.
We want accountability. We want justice. We want the ability to get answers to the questions that we have.
To get it all, attorney Chris Cassiano is now climbing the legal mountaintop, petitioning the Supreme Court to hear Ryan's case. More than 20 organizations representing military causes have filed briefs in support, along with several members of Congress.
When you think about the gravity of that, how do you feel about being the face of a case that you're trying to ask the highest court in the land to weigh in on what happened to you?
This is the position that the Lord put me into, and this is the position where this is, to me, my new mission.
We're doing what we're doing, not just for us, but for the bigger picture, for all the other service members that have come before them, that will come after them.
Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro is trying another avenue to make things right for active duty service members. As the Carters lobby the Supreme Court, he's lobbying Congress, fighting for the HERO Act, which would allow active duty military to file lawsuits for malpractice, saying the current claims process is broken.
And so what we're trying to do with the HERO Act is pretty simple. We're trying to give military members the same rights that civilians have.
Rights including access to information about medical providers that civilians routinely get, from lawsuit filings and disciplinary actions made public by state boards across the nation.
Are you surprised by the lack of transparency for these people and their families who are willing to put their lives on the line for us?
I'm surprised that our government would treat our military members this way, that there would be this level of secrecy, that there would be non-transparency. There really is no reason for that. Now, don't get me wrong. These are also military members who are generally honorable people who are often trying their best. But I'm uncomfortable with a situation where if a medical professional knows that there is basically no chance that there's going to be any consequences if they mess up, if they don't pay particular attention to a procedure that they're carrying out, there is a bad incentive for them then not to take the care that they should.
Care that can end up costing service members their lives, even their quality of life. It's a price paid by Ryan Carter and his wife, Casey.
Sometimes I feel guilty. I talk to a therapist for that once a week.
Feel like a burden?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it is a big burden.
A burden that may turn out to be a blessing to other members of the military, as Ryan continues his service to country, battling through his recovery and the courts.
Our battle isn't over yet either, and we want to hear from you as we continue reporting. If you've experienced medical malpractice in the military, or if you think you can be a source for our stories, fill out our online survey and add to our coverage. You'll find it at InvestigateTV.com/defense. Our investigations have uncovered stunning lapses in transparency and accountability. We've exposed medical misconduct and mistakes hidden from public view that cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And we've highlighted the heartbreak of military families who've paid the ultimate price. Their enemies not on the battlefield, but the Defense Department itself, protecting its best interests instead of the men and women who serve. I'm Josie Sturman. Thanks for watching.